couldn't wait. Hey, it's Romania Black. I'm sorry. I could not wait. I'm going to use the excuse that I am about to travel for the holidays, and so I'm trying to record some things ahead so that I'll have them ready while I'm gone, and this was one of them. I was like, I could go ahead and watch episode 5, but I'm like, well, episode 3 and episode 2 are just coming out, so I feel like I've watched far ahead, but I'm trying to avoid spoilers, and after that last episode, I was like, no, I need to know what happens. God, the last episode was so good, like introducing Johan as the monster, Dr. Tenma's world kind of crashing down around him, Junkers is dead, Lunge is highly suspicious that something has gone awry, and Tenma's not letting on what he knows, and so it's crazy, but I couldn't wait, and so just know that if I see some comments from episodes prior that I feel need to be addressed, I will address them in future episodes. We've got a long road ahead of us with this series, and so I'm not worried about that, but the next few episodes I may have to watch ahead on, so sorry. Just know that I don't mean to, but I had to watch ahead. I could not avoid it. It just had to happen. So yeah. So yeah, I'm really excited by the prospect of what this episode could bring. I don't know what's going to happen now. I feel like Lunge is going to keep following Tenma to watch him because he's suspicious of him. I feel like that's still going to be a thing. And then Tenma, I don't know about Tenma. He broke down at the end of the last episode and just collapsed in the rain, and just his whole the guilt that he saved this boy that supposedly turned out to kill the 3 doctors and then killed Junkers. And it's just like, it's like all his good work was in service of creating this monster. And so, I don't know. I get the feeling that Johan is going to play some intense psychological games on Tenma. Now, why though? The thing of it is like, why is Johan obsessed with Tenma because he saved him? Is the only reason he's sparing his life because he saved him? It had a very if you've ever seen the movie Seven, Kevin Spacey plays the villain in that series, in that movie, and Johan's personality has a very, like, Kevin Spacey, the John Smith character John Doe has a very similar vibe to him. So I kept thinking I went back and rewatched episode 4, and I just thought of Seven, like, just like that creepy, like, not affected, detached vibe from Johan. So the big question is the sister, because Tenma knows there's a twin sister, Lunge knows there's a twin sister, if they think that it's Johan Liebert. So where has she been at this whole time? What's going on? Like I said in the last reaction, either she knows what's up and is an accomplice, or she knows what's up and is in denial, or she doesn't know. And maybe she's not even associated with him. So we have to tackle her as a character. And the question is, are we going to do it this episode, or are we going to wait down the road and then he meets her in a restaurant or something and realizes who she is and what her mental state is? That's the big question. But yeah, last episode my jaw was on the ground and I didn't speak a lot during it, but we still have a lot to talk about. So I am excited to see what all ends up happening with this episode and what we get. So we'll see, right? We shall see. So, with that being said, let's not waste any more time. I'm excited to dive into episode 5 of Monster and just see what happens. So, with that being said, we are going to watch episode 5 of Monster, and we are going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Oh, this episode was really good. And lots of things set up. Lots of things. Lunge nowhere to be seen. This is all Tenma doing some investigation of his own and foregoing the doctor's duties. So interesting. Yeah. So Tenma has had an earth-shattering revelation about his own, his philosophies, his principles, and then Johan shows up and is like, yeah, you saved me and I'm a mass murderer, so deal with this. So Tenma, I do want to make notes about Tenma. This is mainly, I think, going to talk about Nina, but I do want to make notes about Tenma. Tenma, he has, I don't want to say he's let himself go, but he's got the 5 o'clock shadow. He is not maintaining that pristine image of a doctor. We don't even know. He's not being a doctor right now. He's all the way over in Holm. He's not even in the city where he is from. He's traveled. And he's assumingly going to Heidelberg next. So I wonder if he's just taking time off. Like, I'm assuming the question is, has he taken time off? I mean, granted, he may have just been like in a mental state being like, I gotta take a break. But again, that ties to the whole fact that he's spent 9 years doing his duties as a doctor, and suddenly he takes off after, Johan like comes out of the shadows and almost like entices him to go after him. That's the thing about this. This almost seems like Johan was planning for him to come after him. Like, what? I feel like, again, we talk about the movie Seven. I don't want to spoil Seven because it's a really good movie and you should see it if you've not seen it. But there is an aspect of it where the antagonist knows that one of the characters has this kind of Tenma idealism about him. He's idealistic, but he is malleable. He has this kind of malleability to him where he could tip the scales if he wanted to. If he was pushed hard enough, he could tip the scales. And Johan knows that Tenma is capable of that because when he got so mad and said that, Dr. Heinemann and them deserve to die, which is funny because Heinemann is the name of the family that took her in. So I wonder if they're related. But Heinemann may be like Smith, and it's a common name in Germany. So there's probably nothing to read into that. But Johan knows that Tenma is capable of having these dark thoughts and this darkness surrounding him if he's pushed far enough. And so in the movie Seven, the antagonist knows the protagonist is also capable of something similar. And so the antagonist keeps pushing the protagonist to the limits to try to get them to tip the scales. And I wonder if Johan is wanting to do the same thing. If Johan is trying to push Tenma, who's supposedly this beacon of light, into the darkness alongside him. Maybe that's the case too. So there's some questions with Tenma. There's questions like, is Johan leading Tenma to him in the darkness? Because he told the one man who is blind. I thought for a second, I was like, is he really blind or is his eyes just really blue? And I settled on the fact that his eyes were blue, and I was wrong. He's blind. But how perfect. He can't see Johan. He has no clue what he looks like. He can't trace him. That's why Johan was comfortable using him as a means. So I'm like, is he leading Tenma to him? For what purpose? Why? What's the point of the game? Like, is this a game? Is this a game in that sense? And what is the overall goal? Like, what if he appreciates and admires Tenma, then what's the idea behind it? How does that work? We don't know enough in Johan's train of thought yet to know why he's doing the things he's doing. We're just seeing it kind of unfold. This is the early stages of everything, right? But him he told the blind man about Tenma, and it'd be like, almost like he was expecting Tenma to go after him. So this all seems very orchestrated, right? How orchestrated is this? He seems like he is set up. He's just torturing people. And that kind of goes back to the blind man that told Tenma that he wanted to know about war stories. I guess at this point we need to have just like a whole thing on Johan, right? We need to have a whole thing on Johan because I'm getting away from Tenma. I'm getting away from Tenma and talking about Johan. So we'll use red. And we'll just do Johan up here. I feel like I just want to call him Johan right now, even though he's gone by several different aliases. But the idea that he has been calculated and is a long game planner. He set this up a while ago because he was there from 86 to 88 with that blind man, like years and years ago. So is this like the first family that died? So I'm assuming maybe this was the first couple that died. Okay, the first couple that died, it was 1986 to 1988 is when they were there, right? And this story, 9 years, it's 1995 now. So 9 years before was 1986. So this was the first family he was with. Okay. And he was 12 years old. And 9 years later would have been 21. Okay, so presumably he's 21 now. Okay, because his sister, maybe his sister was a year younger. Well, they're twins, so he's about to be 20. Well, it says 9 years ago, so he was 20. Said he was 12 years old, but that 9 years ago, that would make him 21, and she's 20. So were they twins or not? Okay, so were they twins or not? Or is the family not know how old she is? So that brings to light, okay, I'll put, I'm like, whiteboard coon, you ready to get a workout? We're going to do green. We're going to put Nina. Nina Fortner, which is not her actual name, but Liebert may not be their name either. So is she really a twin? Is she a twin to Johan? That's the question, because if he was 12 years old when he was there in 1986, then it's 9 years later, so he would be 21, because she's about to be 20. Okay. Or it could be the fact that they weren't sure exactly how old she was, and instead they just kind of assumed, and they were like, well, I think she's around 11, so we'll just say 11. And now they think she's 20, when in reality she's about to be 21. Or it could be that he didn't know, and they assumed around 12 when he was really 11. So we don't know exactly if they're 20 or 21, or if they're twins. That's the thing. Are they twins, or are they brother and sister? Are they even related at all? He told the blind man that was his sister. So I'm assuming they are twins, and maybe they just had the ages off by a little bit, because I think that they took her in and they kidnapped her. They weren't going to tell her. I think that they adopted her. I think they adopted her and treated her as their own. So the question is, did they not kidnap? Kidnap is, I said it in the episode, but it's not really what I mean. Did they formally adopt her, or just take her in? They had pictures of a baby. I was wondering if the family lost their daughter and then they found her and were like, you can be our child, and then just took her in. It's not kidnapping, but it's essentially like they just took her in without anybody saying anything. So I don't know. And then she's been seeing a school counselor. Okay. A school or otherwise. Might not be a school counselor. We'll get his name in a little bit when we actually go through the episode. We haven't even gone through the episode yet. But yeah, she's been seeing a school counselor and talking about, and I keep going back to this because I think of something, talking about her dreams. That she's had the same nightmare, but not lately. Well, that's probably about to change. And Johan says the only person he only trusts his sister. Now, is he referring to his sister with like a kind and affection, right? Because he did on the hospital bed reach for her. He reached for her like he wanted to come out and like connect with her, and she was like, ugh, traumatized. Does he really trust her and just want to love her as a brother, or is there like a creepy attraction there, and it's like, that's your sister, if she even is? But yeah, so what is the goal? What's the agenda? He's super calculated and has played the long game. So throughout this episode, I kind of want to add to Tenma, Johan, and Nina. There are 3 characters here. Lunge didn't even make an appearance. I'm really surprised. Lunge was not in this at all. None of the other players except Tenma were, that are the adults in the situation. So this episode was all Nina's. So that kind of makes sense. I get that, but it's very curious. So yeah, so we have this episode. Turn my sound off. What a misdirect, right? A misdirect right off the start, because this episode leads you to believe that she's running away from the monster, right? It leads you to believe that Nina is running away from something that's chasing her. And she is, figuratively, but here she's running to the school. I thought that she was like, because I forgot this was a school campus. For a second, I'm like, is she like at a ward? Is she near the hospital? Is she running to meet? I went into this episode thinking that her and Dr. Tenma were just going to bump paths. That she was going to bump into him and it was going to lead. Because there's been a few things in this episode that's made me believe that maybe the two of them could work well together if they talk to one another. Like they try to work well to solve this mystery with Johan. I don't know if that's even going to happen at this point. But I thought she was going to run into him this episode. Not at all. Nope. But the moment you see her running with her hair back to the audience, it's clear that it's there. Now, I wanted to see if we could see Johan in the crowd, because Otto is the one that we find out is the case. Now, the Stuttgart case is the stuff that was based on. So she is going to school to be a prosecutor. All right, she is in law school. In law school to be a prosecutor. That is fascinating, and we want to talk about it when we get to that point in the episode of of being a prosecutor. Okay, fascinating. And so, yeah, he asks the class, what's the deal? What is this silence? He kind of looks like Heinemann a little bit. He looks like the director, right? I think it's the eyebrows. The bushy eyebrows make him look a little bit like the director. But I was like, wow, that's a startling difference. He's like, is this a Zen temple? No. And she goes up there. Okay, so we have the one guy sitting in the seat, the auto guy, which at the beginning, I wondered if that was maybe Johan, but the hair's not bleached enough. His hair's like bleach blonde. And so he is like, oh, well, that's, he doesn't know the answer to the question. I like the one guy's behind his book, like, please don't call on me. The worst feeling if you're sitting in a classroom and you don't know the answer and you're afraid of being called on, it's the worst feeling. And then will anyone here break this silence? And she does. She bolts right in, right? She runs right into that room. And so he knows a bit about her, right? So we get in the matter of 30 seconds some information about her. She is a chronic latecomer, meaning that she has been late to many, many classes. This is nothing new. And she's 13 minutes late. At our school, there's an unwritten rule that it's not written, but it's like the common lore of the school that if your teacher is 15 minutes late to class, you don't have to go to class. Everybody just leaves if they're 15 minutes late. And if a student is 15 minutes late, then you can shut the door and leave them out and not let them come in. That's the unspoken rule. I've never turned away a student for coming late because I'm glad you showed up. And I have not been late to class because I'm constantly worried about that. But she's 13 minutes late. So I wondered if that was like the only saving grace. He gave her like 2 minutes there. He's like, your part-time pizza delivery job was awfully busy today. And she says that she's sorry. I love her fashion. She all her clothes match perfectly. She seems very put together. She seems very put together despite herself. Despite how late she is and how disheveled she probably appears, she's still well put together, right? And he says that she's a part-time pizza deliverer. Which does establish that she can drive a scooter, so she is capable of driving one of those. So that's good to know. If she needs to escape, on a scooter in the future episodes, she has the capabilities. And he's like, I'm going to ask you a question before you sit down. What was the basis for the decision in the Stuttgart case? And she's also studious and smart. Mm-hmm. And she says it by word. The accused claimed the kidnapping was a sham and that the victim's death had been due to an accident. And then after an investigation of the crime scene, it was found the victim's death had indeed been accidental. And so based on the fact that the intent to kill must be proven in a murder, I believe the sentence of 15 years was handed down. Yeah. So she's smart. Her and Johan are intelligent. She's clearly studious and smart, despite everything going on around her. Okay? And we established that Johan is intelligent. He's intelligent too. And he's trilingual? They say he's trilingual. He knows German, English, and French. I say German because they're in Germany, so it makes sense he would automatically grow up knowing German. And he was from Germany, supposedly. So he's trilingual. Awesome. Great. Our serial killer is incredibly smart, and his twin sister is as well. She probably just doesn't even realize how smart she is. And so then he's like, okay, very good. I'm glad the professor's like, that's all I needed. Thanks for answering the question. His bow tie matches her outfit. It works really good. But yeah. And so we'll skip the OP and go from there. So yeah. So her friends, it seems like she has a bunch of friends. They're all, the friends that she's walking with are all guys. So she's friends with both girls and guys on campus. And they talk about how that she basically saved them from having to write a 50-page report. They're like, you saved us from having to do makeup work because we didn't study. And this guy, Peter, he's like, well, I'll have to treat Nina, who we're greatly indebted to something to eat. So, yeah. So, bless his soul. We'll put him over here. That Peter, this poor boy with the very unfortunate haircut, has a crush on Nina. That Nina is aware of. But I don't think that Nina necessarily blows him off. I think she just literally is so busy and has so many irons in the fire, she just doesn't have time to hang out with him. She's like, I'm doing all these different things, Peter. I don't got time. And so, which is unfortunate because he seems like a decent guy. Kind of looks like Mello off of Death Note, which is funny. But yeah, she's like, oh, I'm sorry, Peter. I have a club meeting today. And she's like, bye. And then yeah, he's like, she turned you down again. Like, how many times was that? So he's like, shut up. He's like, I'd like to see if there's anyone who can get Nina to agree to a date. Well, and that seems to be the case. But she not only, we get these established with her, she's not only a pizza delivery person, so she knows how to drive a scooter. She's super smart. She's constantly late, but that might not be a bad thing, right? But she also knows self-defense and is good at it. Like, yeah, she's good at self-defense. So that leads me to believe that even though her mental state is extremely delicate and like the just looking at her brother triggers a lot of things, despite that, she physically and intelligently, academically is sound and strong. So it's just the mental trauma of her brother that she can't quite get over. But yeah, she's really good. Like, she knocks them all down. Girl knows what she's doing. Like, she is capable of self-defense. Yeah. And then she drives a pizza. So we get these little brief glimpses of Nina to establish her character. And she also says that she's chronically late, so her deliveries are usually late, and she doesn't want to get it from the manager, right? And then she sees the kids walking by in the costumes, and there was like a pirate, a jester, and a mouse. And she's like, oh, hey, it's fine. We're all good here. And then she goes back home. And everything seems fine. It's like the perfectly normal family. Her mom's dyed her hair. There's the dad. It's all like everything seems totally normal, right? And there's just like the same grumpy things. And she laments seeing that there were kids in costumes today. And they're like, it's the St. Hadrian costume parade. That seems like something that will be something later. Maybe not. Maybe they won't even mention it again. But I was just like, St. Hadrian costume parade. I thought at that point that we were going to get, maybe like Johan in a mask or something showing up, and like it's the costume party, so it doesn't seem conspicuous, but it's a way for him to like sneak her out. And that may still happen. If they have the costume parade, they may still have like him find a way to like sneak over and like take her away. Who would know? He's in costume. They wouldn't be able to trace him. We'll see if that pans out to anything. She's like, I wish I dressed up like that when I was little. They were so cute. And the parents are like, oh God, Trigger, we don't want to talk about it. And they're like, oh, you did dress up in a costume. So they show these pictures. She's like, isn't that right, dear? And he's like, oh yeah, that's right. And she's like, I don't remember. But we see them with this baby, right? We see them with this baby, and she's blue-eyed and blonde hair just like her. And it shows them with her. And then they find a picture and they're like, look at this. And it just happens to be a portrait where the girl has the mouse costume on, the mouse with the cheese, but you can't really see her face because she's in the costume. And she just doesn't remember. But that's the thing. I think that they obviously had a child, and I bet the child died, and then she took the child's place, and they've raised her as their own these last 9 years. And she conveniently cannot remember anything before the age of 10. So, well, she says before the age of 10. So she was 10 when they came here. So, all right. So there is a little give and take. Somebody's lying about something. Either they're 10 or they're 12 or they're 11s. But somebody, either Johan or Nina, either they one side's lying or exaggerating the age a little bit, or they're not twins and the ages are correct. And she's about to be 20 and he's 21. We don't know. We don't know yet. But yeah, she's like, I just can't remember. I do love her room is very like neat and orderly, and I do love she's got the Mac from 1994. Oh my gosh. Yeah, you all watching this, unless you were raised in the 90s, probably are like, what is this hunk of junk? This was very state of the art back in the 90s, and if you look, that little black spot there is where you put a floppy disk in. If you don't know what a floppy disk is, no worries, I'm just ancient. It's fine. but the email and stuff is very, very, God, it's so realistic, and I'm like having nostalgia, right? But back then, you didn't just send emails to anyone. You only had your friends' emails, and you had like maybe 10. I think my first time using email, I had like 10 email addresses, and that was it, right? It was very, very, very old school and rudimentary. Distant spring, I forlorningly wait for spring that will never come. Hannah. Oh, Hannah, will you hurry and get over your broken heart? So, okay, so there's different emails here. So looking at this, it's funny you have in the Outlook, which is what the email was, you have it in English, so you have message settings and attachments, but then you have on, which I guess is German for to, and von, which is from. Okay, well that makes sense, I'm learning German. Look at that. So von so we had one from Peter, one from Hannah, and Bitrif. I wonder if that's like the subject. Maybe the subject line is Bitrif. Okay. So on is to Nina, but then the von, there's nothing there. Okay. And I'm sure those of you that read German, if the subtitles are off, you're going to tell me if it's right or not. But it says, zu überschütten mit den allerschönsten Blumen mir desse zu erfüllen kam ich auf die Welt. Probably butchered that all. But yeah. She's like, what's this email from a rando? But she says she didn't give her email address out to anybody but her friends. So how did Johan get it? So that's the question. The question is, how did Johan get Nina's email? I mean, I guess if he tracked it down from somebody, it wouldn't be hard to find, but that's so creepy. Like, how? How'd he get it? Let me send you the world's most beautiful flower. And it says, I was born to blanket you in flowers. Okay, so the question is, let me send you the world's, so what is the world's most beautiful flower? He wants to send it to her, but what is it? And he says, I was born to blanket you in flowers. That seems very creepy. She takes it as romantic, but I'm like, no. If I got some random message like that, I'd be like, and delete. Because like that's the thing, with no context, she thinks it's from Peter. So she thinks Peter's being romantic and cute. And she's like, look at you, Peter. Now that's what I'm talking about. It's not. But I was like, if some random person sent me that, I'd be like, well, that's a little bit creepy. I don't think I like that. And so she was like, wow, I wonder who sent this. And then she thinks about it and she's like, I'm very impressed, Peter. Like, she's like, look at you. Like, you can tell she maybe like wants to like Peter, but she's just been busy or hesitating on it. So then they go back and then we get the counselor asking how, Dr. Gadel asking how she's been. Okay. So Dr. Gadel. He seems to have seen her for quite a long time. So I wonder if her parents in quotation marks, took her to see him like as soon as they got her. And then she had all these nightmares and this darkness. And he slowly helped her to get over that, right? And so he talks about how people can become insecure during their student years and that dreams of the future can be confused with other insecurities and you lose sight of who you are. So he's like, sometimes you get so stressed and stuff that your dreams maybe are representations of your insecurities and you let that control your life and you shouldn't do that. And so he has this like philosophical thing telling her that you can spend your entire life trying to figure out who you are and never discover. Which seems kind of on the nose a little bit, this idea of looking for an identity and not finding it. Which is really sad, right? It's very sad. It's like this idea of looking for identity and not being able to find it. Which is, I wonder if that's going to be her character throughout this. She keeps trying to figure out who she is and she can't discover it. All you can do now is be prepared to spend your whole life finding out who you are and do what you can towards your future. That's all you can do. You can't control it, right? And so even she says, I want to become a public prosecutor, which I think is interesting. I said that earlier. I think the public prosecutor thing is interesting because the prosecutor is usually the one that's trying to convict the, not the victim, but the assailant. They're the ones trying to convict the person that did the crime, right? Not defend them. And it's kind of funny because then you have Johan, who is the assailant. So she would be the one passing judgment or trying to get judgment passed upon him, which is fun. But then you also have Tenma. So it's curious. You have Nina, who is trying to punish the murderer. Then you have Johan, who is the murderer. And then you have Tenma, who defended the murderer. So that's so curious, right? Now, is Tenma trying to defend him now? No, not necessarily. He's just trying to find out more information about Johan to see, like, how did we get to this point? Where did this come from? But in the past, he has defended him. He saved his life, and he defended him time and time again in the hospital. So you have two sides here, Tenma and Nina, who have come at Johan from different angles. Johan, ironically enough, trusts his sister more than anyone, and she's the one that could potentially be wanting to punish him. So it's curious. It's very interesting how that choice of being a prosecutor. And he makes note that there's just like some kind of a vast darkness surrounding her. Gee, I can't imagine what. And I like that Peter just like stabs the sausage down as we cut to the next scene. His hairstyle is quite unfortunate. I think if Peter just changed it up, he'd be fine. And she tries to tell Peter, oh, well, you were the one. I know, it's funny that she has these two friends, Clara and Beatrice, but she never sits with them. She sits with Peter and the other guys. She clearly likes Peter, right? She clearly seems to like him. She hangs out with him and his friends, but I guess she's waiting on him to but he does make a move, so what are you doing, girl? Either tell him to cut his hair and date him, or date him regardless. It's like, what are you doing? So I'm like, you clearly like hanging out with him. Is it that you're afraid of getting out of the friend zone, Nina? Is that it? I mean, she says, I was born to blanket you in flowers. I never thought you had the makings of a poet. And Peter, I like that Peter's pretty, like, honest about it. Peter didn't lie and say, oh yeah, that was me. He was like, I couldn't have wrote that if I was standing on my head. I do like that Peter's pretty honest. He seems like a good guy, right? He seems like a decent person. He's like, I couldn't come up with those words. And she's like, oh, then who was it? I only gave my email address to my friends. And he's like, I don't know. All I know is I have another rival in love. So he's very open about it. It's like, girl, you just need to take some initiative. Although I don't know now how that is going to go. And she's like, who in the world could it be? Who indeed? So yeah, she's sitting in class and this is when she gets triggered, right? She gets triggered because of the perpetrator after shooting the parents to death, strangled the two children with a rope. And that is what triggers the memory, the idea of a family being massacred, which is exactly what happened to hers. Now, the question is, did someone attack Johan and kill the parents? Did Johan do it, or did she have a part in it? Because what it seems like is that she seems to have thought her brother died along with her mom and dad, and then when she saw the brother again being alive, it was like seeing a ghost, and she couldn't take it, and she was like, maybe that was the case. But if there was more to that, if she tried to shoot him or if something else. I realized in the last reaction, I was like, well, what if she shot him? And then I realized that there's a big problem with that entire theory. The problem is, where was the gun, right? Because if she shot Johan, where was the gun that shot him? And why didn't they find it? And her prints would have been all over it. So ignore that theory. I don't think she shot him. And I don't think that she was responsible for her parents' death. I think she was there. The question is, was Johan responsible somehow? Or if Johan wasn't responsible, did she witness everything? How'd she not end up dead? There's a lot of mystery around that night. And so still things we don't know, but she kind of like gets really sick and can't answer the question, and the professor's like, is something wrong? And Peter kind of makes fun of her, but then she throws up, right? She just like gets sick in the middle of class and can't take it. And I like that Peter went outside with her. I like that Peter like stood out in the hallway with her, and he's like, do you need to go to the infirmary? Like, he wanted to make sure she was okay. Peter's a good guy. He's probably gonna die. He's probably gonna get killed by Johan, but he seems like a really nice guy. Peter grew on me this episode. He just has an unfortunate haircut. And she's like, listening to the professor's story, I suddenly felt, and she makes him stop it. Because he's like, tries to make a joke about it, like, oh, it's just a family getting slaughtered, and she's like, I need you to stop. Like, it's a trigger for her. And he does. He's like, I thought you were awfully brave, but you're more sensitive than I expected. And he's like, what, did you see a horror movie that terrified you as a kid? And it's like, well, you could say that. She kind of did. And he tries to make a joke out of it, right? He tries to use humor to lighten the mood. He knows that she's stressed, and he tries to like make a joke about the doctor to get her to ease up, right? I like Peter. He has his heart in a good place. He just has no clue what is going on with this. And she's like, I can't think back on my childhood because I can't remember anything from before I was 10 years old. I don't remember anything before the age of 10. Funny that. So yeah, she goes home. We get that, and she's just kind of conflicted and trying to remember her childhood memories. And then so we see that she got an email, but we don't see what the email was. That's so frustrating, right? So frustrating. So meanwhile, we go back to Cologne, Germany, where Cologne was where the murders were taking place, the families. And Dr. Tenma, I like it's such a misdirect because you think that it's Lunge interviewing all these people, right? That's what I thought. I thought it was Lunge the whole time. I was like, oh, Lunge's interviewing them. He's asking. But then it doesn't make sense because it doesn't make sense in that moment because Lunge already had the information from someone prior. So it would make sense this was Tenma and not them. And she's like, now that you mention it, they had a son. So that's curious. So that Tenma, the couples that died, the report said they had no children. But the eyewitness report said they did. So that's curious. So like the first couple that was killed, the report was that there was no children. But the eyewitness testimony said that there was a son. And we get the name Michael and we get the name Franz. So there's at least maybe 2 couples killed that he talks about, 2 of the 4. Okay. All right. So Michael and Franz, or Mihail. At one point they said Mihail, and I was like, and Franz. Because Mihail means like of God or something, right? And so that's interesting. I'm curious if maybe Johan has somebody on the inside that's tampering with the reports so that not all the information gets out. I'm so fascinated, right? Very curious. And like his name was Michael. They lived about 2 years. And so that would have been 1986 to 1988. And yet everybody tries to remember him. And some people do. And they said he was around, but they said here he was around 14. So that would have been around 14 when he left. Okay, so 1988, he would have been 14. Gotcha. That makes sense. All adds up. And then they say, Michael, you say, I seem to remember him. And they're like, why? Are you the police? But Tenma kind of does look like a detective with his trench coat pulled up. He has like a detective look. So Tenma looks like a detective. He does have like the 5 o'clock shadow, the slightly traumatized look, everything. Lunge, would he be proud? Lunge keeps a pretty straight appearance. I don't know. Michael Reichman. He was a student in my class. Like, she was teaching, right? And the way she describes him, she's like, he didn't leave much of an impression. Yeah, you know, a lot of serial killers don't. Like, if you watch true crime, a lot of them just seem like normal people, right? So, let me see. Not much of an impression. Nope. Creepily enough, he didn't leave much of an impression. I don't remember him well. So yeah, he did. And that makes sense that he didn't leave much of an impression, because if he was planning on killing the family and moving from place to place, you wouldn't want to be conspicuous. You wouldn't want to stand out. You just want to blend in. And this kid who, you know, this like pale blonde hair, blue-eyed kid that just doesn't leave much of an impression, is super quiet, fades into the distance, fades into the crowd, and you don't notice him. I'm not sure he had any friends. I don't know either. And there are no records. Everything burned in a fire 6 years ago. So here's the thing. This was 9 years in the future. So 6 years back, if it's 1995, right? Funny that 1989, the year after he left, all the records burned in a fire. Isn't that convenient? All the traces of him being there are gone, so people can't remember. Oh my gosh, it's crazy. And yeah, you see Tenma with his trench coat walking the beat, just trying to figure a thing out. He's like, there definitely was a boy named Michael living in Cologne until 6 years ago. And Michael's real name, as far as we know, is Johan. He's like, who are you? But what's the use of knowing that? What is the use? Yeah, what's it going to do for you? He's a serial killer who's a twin. That's all there is. What am I doing? So yeah, so Tenma's having this crisis of being like, he wants to find out more information. He wants to do right. He wants to do what's right and find the most info he can. And the question is he gathering the intel to give back to Lunge? Is he gathering the intel to do something on his own and take responsibility for saving his life? Like, I would assume it's the latter. But it's curious that he's like, he's just trying to figure things out and do the best that he can. And then I was like, you just now figured out, Tenma, that he has a twin? He was like, wait a minute. He was like, a twin. Yeah. He's like, what about his sister? Where did his twin sister go? I'm like, exactly. Where did she go? And then, I'll come for you soon. At that point, I'd be a little freaked out. If somebody said that because when he said, I was born to cover you in flowers, I was like, that seems almost like flowers on a grave or something. It doesn't seem sentimental or romantic. And then he says he's coming for you soon. I figure he's going to kill the parents. And he's going to come after her. I don't know. My theory is that he has jumped from family to family looking for Nina. And so that he doesn't leave any trace behind when he jumps, he kills each family. He kills each family as he goes. But they're all couples who didn't have their own kids who adopted him. Okay? And then, yeah, child 7 or 8 years ago. So, okay. So that first family that knew him as Michael, knew him from 6 years ago. So they knew him back in 1989, just for a brief period of time. So until he left and burned the records. And she said Mr. and Mrs. Heinemann, who were killed, were fostering a boy. Yes. What was he like? So Tenma is connecting all the families that have been killed to see if they were fostering a kid or had a son. And so far, 2 of them have. What a coincidence, right? They're the ones that have died. What was he like? And they're like, that was a long time ago. He only lived with them about a year. I don't remember anything about him. And he's like, did he have a sister? And she's like, it was only the boy. And she doesn't remember it. She's like, I just want to forget it. It was really traumatic. I don't want to listen to it. Like, bye. And that's when the creepy guy... And honestly, when he, like, asked Tenma to come up stairs, he had, like, the shadow over his face. And he was really creepy. I was like, what are we doing? And when you get inside of his house, it's kind of creepy, too, because it's all empty. And just everything is just kept in order. Like, he probably has a maid or something. But then when you find out, you know, that the boy kept coming up there and stuff, and that he's blind. But what I thought was interesting about this was that he has on the wall, he's someone that fought in World War II for Germany. And he has on his wall, like, all the old military, like, pictures of him in the service and everything like that. And the guy is very blunt, and now it makes sense why he's blunt, because he's blind. He can't see what Tenma's doing. That all makes sense now. Okay. And he puts the tea on. Now, you may ask yourself, how is this man capable of that? But my grandmother, she had diabetes and she was blind herself. She became blind. She wasn't originally blind. And this guy was not originally blind. He was in the service. So he became blind either during war or afterwards, right? So my grandmother, she became blind too. And she would cook all the time in her house when I was a kid. Like, she'd cook all the time. It freaked my parents out because my parents were like, stop, what are you doing? But she's like, I know where everything in this house is. I know where the stove is. I know where the oven is. I can make my own food. I know where things are at, and I know how to turn it on and off. Like, she was a pro. Now, if you moved anything in her house, she freaked out because she was like, now I don't know where things are. But as long as you kept your house orderly as a kid, you were fine. So it doesn't surprise me that he can do this and make the tea, because it's second nature. If you do it so often, it's second nature, right? So it's a nice misdirect that you think, oh, well, how could he be blind? But then, no, it makes sense. It makes sense. But he brings in the tea, right? And on the wall, there's all the different things of him in battle. And him receiving a medal, clearly. And when you first see the portrait of him, there's like a cross in the shadows from the window. But yeah, it shows him with the hat and everything. And this is what's interesting too, is that Tenma, the idea of him giving information to Dr. Tenma, and Tenma's from Japan and he's from Germany, and it's been, 50 years since World War II, so it's been a considerable amount of time, but it's still fascinating to see him, like, looking at all the stuff on the wall and putting two and two together, right? And he probably doesn't realize he's blind because he sees that he was in service. And so he sets the tea down right in front of him, and Tenma goes to take it, right? And then he pulls the chair up and sits beside him. And so that's when Tenma asks about, and he says, you're a doctor, aren't you? The boy told me. You're Dr. Tenma, aren't you? Which is kind of creepy, because, like, he was expecting Tenma to come. Like, did the boy tell him, like, okay, there's going to be this Japanese doctor come to investigate? Like, how did he know? What is up with that? What is it? And Tenma's like, how would he have known? That's creepy. And meanwhile, and it's kind of like the very next line we get after that moment was him saying, he's coming for you. So it's almost like Johan is setting both Nina and Tenma up to come to him. He, like, wants the people that he trusted the most next to him. He wants his sister there and Tenma there. Ugh. I don't know how to feel about it. But yeah, an anonymous message. And like, man, you look happy. And they're like, call him this like prince with like on a white horse. And I'm like, I don't know if I describe Johan as that. He seems like he'd ride a black horse, or, a pale horse would be what he would ride throughout the scene. I don't know. And so then what I loved about this episode was the misdirect, where they said that there was a mysterious boy that sat in the legendary room 12 seat where you're called on by the teacher, but he's never called on and instead looks at Nina. And so we as the audience are led to believe, oh, that's Johan. Okay, and it might have still been, but they set up the auto guy to say hi to her. And so we get the misdirect thinking that it's him, and it turns out not be. And then he's standing right behind him. But we go back to the old man that's like, the boy was extremely grateful to you. Said you're the one who saved him. You meant more to him than a parent. So he just wants his father back and his sister back. Yikes. He's like, what name did he go by? And he said Franz. But he said it wasn't his real name. And Tim was just like, oh. And he's like, he trusted you enough to tell you that. And he's blind, so of course he did. And so he says that the boy asked him lots of questions, right? He said the boy asked him lots of questions. And he talked about how he was very bright and well-mannered. And he listened to a lot of his stories. And he's like, he came to my apartment every day. And I lived alone, so I always welcomed him. He's like, he sat in that seat and spent his time studying. So he didn't want to have anything to do with the family. I want to make note on that. He went to the man's house. He had no use for the actual family. Instead, he went to the veteran. Okay. Now, the important thing here is that he asked him stories about when he was younger. And Tim was like, well, what kind of stories did he tell? And he's like, that boy would ask me war stories. And so he constantly wanted to know about war and about terror and how people reacted to it. And this should have been a sign that he was blind too, because he asked, well, how did he react when he told him the stories? And he's like, well, he probably had a gleam in his eye and a smile, but he doesn't know because he couldn't see. So there's that. That's interesting. But he tells a story about how they were attacked by an enemy. And although we had suffered a fatal blow, we kept going. And inside that groaning ship, we waited in terror. And we returned to that living hell, from that living hell 38 hours later. And so he says an ordinary child would probably look at it as an adventure story, but no, not him. He was wanting to know about the terror of them. It's so creepy. Yeah, extreme terror. What is the reaction of a person standing on the edge of death? That was his only interest. He took pleasure in terror. Yeah, serial killer stuff. Yeah, just delighting in people. It's like what the telltale sign of somebody being a serial killer when they're younger is like if they attack animals and they do it for fun. Nope. He's like, probably had a gleam in his eye and a smile on his face. And that's when he says, probably. He's like, I'm blind, you see. And Tim was like, well, shit. He's like, I don't know his real name or what he looks like. He said he would collect her when she turned 20. So yeah, that's the thing. He said he'd go collect his sister. Collect. I don't like it. No. When she turned 20. So he is going to collect her. It's so crazy because he says that he trusted her more than anything and seems like in his emails he loves her, but I'm like, no, he's probably going to torture her and drive her crazy. So, no. And he said she's in Heidelberg. So she's been there a while. So he's done his research and knows that she's there. And this poor Otto guy, he didn't stand a chance. And that's when she sees him standing there, like just inconspicuous. And he just looks, he doesn't look suspicious at all. He doesn't look maniacal. He doesn't look interesting. He looks kind of handsome, but otherwise it's like nothing about him is suspicious. He just looks like an average everyday person. Oh, and her seeing him just like triggers her. And he just smiles at her and then walks away. What the heck? He walks away as she collapses. Like, he's clearly getting ready to follow her and figure out where... He's going to follow her and figure out, like, where she lives. But how's he been tracing her? What is all this? And what is Tenma going to do? I mean, the thing that you should do, Tenma, is go tell Lunge, but Lunge may not do anything about it, right? Because Lunge may suspect him. So, like, the thing would be... The question is Tenma going to go tell Lunge this information in the hopes that Lunge will go and do something to try to save her? Or is Tenma going to try to take matters into his own hands and save her himself? Which would be a very bad idea. But it's like he's at the point where if he goes and tells Lunge and Lunge is like, oh, I'm not going to deal with it, then he knows she's in danger. and then his hand is forced anyway. So it's like, do I just beat around the bush and go, or do I just cut my corners and try to save her myself? And what is Johan going to do if he gets his hands on her? I don't know. Like I said, I'm going on vacation with family for Thanksgiving here in the US. We have a family trip planned. And so I'm going to be away from my computer for like half a week, which is the most I've been away from my computer in a long time. And so I'm trying to record ahead so that everything will be set up while I'm gone. So I may go ahead and watch episode 7. I may have to go ahead and watch episode 7 and see, or watch episode 6. I may have to go ahead and watch episode 6 and see what happens. But that's as far as I'll probably watch before I read more comments. I may watch episode 6 before I see more comments, but after that, I'll wait and see what everybody says about some of the other episodes. But oh my God. So we know what Nina's here doing now. We know how Nina's life's been, what she's been up to. We still know very little about Johan, but we're getting crumbs as we go. And then the question is, what is Tenma going to do? Is he going to go back to being a doctor, or is this like him just becoming obsessed with Johan and trying to understand him and why he's doing the same things that he's doing? I don't know. I don't know. But you know what? We'll find out, right? So please no spoilers, but I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. And I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And yeah, I'll be back very soon with more Monster. Bye.